Rolling action.
Hi Liz, it's Sue. I thought that I would make the bread on the video so you could see what I do. I do it a little differently than what you read about. The first thing I do differently, okay, so let me back up. Ben and I have been going all weekend. I think Eric made rolls this morning, but I'm not sure. So I don't know what state this is in. I'm gonna open it and we're gonna look at it and we're gonna decide what to do. So, okay, here we go. Off with the thing. So I'm looking at this. This looks pretty runny. I would say that it's been a while since it's been fed. It may have been fed last night and it may have been fed 2 days ago. And so you can tell, I keep looking. Are you looking in the bowl again, Ben? So I'm going to smush it here. And see, it smushes pretty good. So that means the yeast is still doing good because it's smushed. And it's a little sticky and runny, so I have a feeling that it hasn't been fed yesterday. But it doesn't really matter. It's not that fussy. You probably read online people use a liquid. I don't do that. I just use this. And I think if you think back to the frontier days when somebody was in the woods, they had a wood stove. What I imagine they did is they took a piece of dough from the wood stove, put it in a bowl, put it near their fireplace, and it stayed nice and warm until the next time they made bread. So here, this is what I start with. I put it aside. I don't usually measure, but Ben and I are here. We're going to make 2 rolls tomorrow. My rule of thumb is it's about a cup. Ben eats a little more than me, so I'm going to do a heaping cup of flour. So that's the first thing I do is I put a heaping cup of flour in. And maybe a little more than that. There's a good heaping cup of flour. And I put that in. When I do it, I don't want to put it all on top of the dough. So I want, usually it's next to it like that. Boom. Okay, so I have dough that I can reach. I have flour. I make a little hole because that's going to be my olive oil hole. Again, I don't measure for 1 cup. I'm probably going to put in a tablespoon of olive oil. I'm not sure I'd put 3 tablespoons in for 3 cups. So I think that, as it gets a little bigger, I might put less. But olive oil is tasty, so I fill up my little hole with olive oil. This is a mixture of sesame seeds and flax seeds. Totally optional, but I think they're tasty and they make the bread taste a little interesting and a little colorful in there. So I sprinkle some seeds on. Again, no measuring, totally whatever. Salt. So salt slows down the rising. And so in the summertime, I put in more salt than I do in the wintertime. And so, again, in the wintertime, I might just do 1 shake of salt. But because it's summer and it looked like nobody had made bread yesterday, it's probably too much. But, so this is how much, what is that, 1/4 teaspoon? Again, I think a good rule of thumb is for 3 cups of flour, somewhere between 1/2 teaspoon and 1 teaspoon. If you read online, you could read any recipe, like a typical loaf is 3 cups of flour. If you read the proportions of that, that's a good rule of thumb to make bread. Okay, what I usually do is I usually go over to the sink and put water in, and I don't know how much I put in, so today, this is a cup of water. I'm not gonna use it all, so I'm gonna put a little water in, and we're just gonna see what happens. So what I put about 1/4 cup of water, and we're just gonna see what happens. And so it's not making a dough, that's obviously not enough water. So I'm gonna put in a little more water. Looks like 1/2 cup of water now I've used. It's starting to make a little dough. So there's 2 things I'm watching here. One is that I still got dough that has to be made. The other thing, it's kind of sticking to my fingers. So it's sort of balanced on both sides, right? That the ideal thing is all the dough gets made into the roll or the ball or whatever you want to call it, and there's no flour left over and nothing sticking to my fingers. I think I'm doing pretty well here though. This is pretty good. I'm gonna need a little more. So this stuff, it's not coming in easily. I like this. I can squeeze it with 1 hand. That's a good consistency. If it's too hard to squeeze with 1 hand, there's too much flour and you need a little more water. I'm gonna put a little more water in here to kind of make that stuff easy to. And now if I touch that, that'd be really sticky. So I try not to touch it because I like the part that isn't sticky. So I kind of put the non-sticky part in there. And that looks pretty darn good. It's, you know, again, because it's summer and it feels a little sticky and it started out a little sticky, I'm going to add just a little more flour to make it so, you know, again, the more wet it is, things will happen quicker too. And being a warm day and not knowing if it got rise yesterday, I'm going to put a little more flour in. It was, you know, it wasn't very much. If stuff stuck to your hands, the best thing to do is put flour in your hand. And so I put flour in my hand, I rub it, and then things aren't going to stick to my hand as much. And now I've made a beautiful thing. So that was basically 1 cup of flour, maybe a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, maybe a tablespoon of oil, and somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 cup of water. And I've made it into a nice, you know, again, this is bread making 101. You want to kind of knead it so that it is smooth. And so it's not really smooth, but it doesn't really matter that much. So I've made a nice ball. I put it on my counter. I put a top on it, and I put it aside. And if I checked it in the morning, it would be that fluffy feeling again. It's going to look much nicer than it did before. You don't have to punch it down in the morning, but there's no harm in it. And it kind of gives you an idea. If I punch it down in the morning, and like so now, if I try and punch this down, no fluffiness. But in the morning when I punch it down, it's going to go poof. There's going to be some air in there. And that's going to be like, oh, my yeast is working. Everything is good. And you can either punch it down in the morning or not. It doesn't matter. But it's a good way to check to say, hey, am I really going to be able to make bread that rises at lunchtime? And if there's any poofiness, it will probably rise. If there's no poofiness, you just have to let it sit for another day, just like you've done. You know that there's no, you know, I don't think that if you fed it at least double what it was, you don't, and there was no poofiness, I would just wait another 24 hours. And then every time you feed it, especially if it's sluggish, if it didn't rise well, or if, like you said, it looks like pancakes, it was too runny, that you have to at least put in at least double what's there. And you can be triple and quadruple, it'll still work, that's great. That the way that I finally got my thing to work when I wasn't doing anything was I threw out 3/4 what I had, and I started with another little bowl. And then I put in 3 cups of flour, and then all of a sudden it started doing things. So a smaller amount to start with, and if you just toss a little stuff in the garbage, you know, it feels horrible, but it's well worth it. If you have this big ball and you rather than using 7 cups of flour to double it, throw a bunch of it out, keep 1 ball and start from there. Okay, we're done making bread. I hope that's helpful. Just let me know if you have any questions and I'll try and answer them. Thanks.